I never thought Christmas dinner could taste bitter, but that night, sitting at the long wooden table in my mother's house, it did. The turkey sat in the middle, golden and steaming, the mashed potatoes, the cranberry sauce, the pies, all of it looked like something out of a perfect holiday movie. But my family was never perfect. We wore fake smiles like masks. And then, in the middle of laughter and clinking glasses, my mother tapped her spoon against her wine glass. Clink, clink, clink. Everyone turned. My siblings, Sarah and James, looked up with wide grins, like they already knew what was coming. Then my mother said the words that cut straight into my chest. "We're selling the family business." And Marcus... Her eyes locked on mine. Cold and sharp. "You're getting nothing." The table went quiet, except for the sound of my siblings' laughter under their breath. Their smirks burned into me like fire. I swallowed hard, my fork slipping from my hand. "Nothing?" My voice cracked. My mother leaned back, sipping her wine like she was enjoying the moment. "That's right, we've already found a buyer." The room spun. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear myself ask, "Who's the buyer?" Her red lips curled into the cruelest grin I'd ever seen. "Keystone Distribution." And right there, something inside me shifted. Because Keystone Distribution wasn't just a random company, it was mine, my creation, my blood, sweat, and tears. So, I smiled. A small, slow smile that made the room tilt. "Mum," I said, my voice steady now, "I am Keystone Distribution." The clinking of forks stopped. Sarah's jaw dropped. Jake's smirk faded. My mother's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. The room went dead silent. You could almost hear the Christmas lights buzzing on the wall. And just as their shock filled the air like smoke, I leaned forward, staring straight at the people who had tried to crush me. "Shall I tell you?" I whispered. "What's really about to happen?" Because they thought they'd stolen everything from me. But what they didn't know was that I was about to set off a bomb none of them would see coming. It started 25 years ago, when I was just a little boy with scraped knees and dreams. Too big for my small town. My dad owned a trucking business called Henderson Logistics. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Dad drove big trucks that carried things from one place to another. Our garage always smelled like motor oil and coffee. Dad's hands were always dirty, but when he hugged me, I felt like the richest kid in the world. "Someday, son," he would tell me, lifting me up to see inside the truck cab. "This will all be yours. You'll take care of the family business." I believed him with my whole heart. Dad worked every day, even when he was sick. He missed my school plays and soccer games, but I didn't mind. I knew he was working for us, for me. At night, he would sit at the kitchen table with papers everywhere, using a calculator that made funny beeping sounds. "Business is hard, Marcus," he would say, rubbing his tired eyes, "but family business is forever." My older brother, Jake, didn't care about trucks. He wanted to be a lawyer. My sister, Sarah, wanted to move to the big city and work in an office. My youngest brother, Tommy, was too little to understand anything except cartoons and candy. But me, I loved everything about the trucking business. I learned how to check oil when I was 8. I could name every part of an engine when I was 10. I drew pictures of trucks in all my school notebooks. Dad smiled so big when I told him I wanted to work with him forever. "That's my boy," he said, messing up my hair. "We'll be a team." Then when I was 12 years old, everything changed. Dad got sick, really sick. The doctors used big words I didn't understand, but I understood the scared look in Mum's eyes. I understood why she cried in the bathroom when she thought nobody was looking. Dad couldn't drive trucks anymore. His hands shook. He forgot things. The business started losing money because Dad couldn't work like before. "Don't worry, Marcus," he told me from his bed, looking so small and tired. "The business will wait for you. When you grow up, you'll make it strong again." But Dad didn't wait for me to grow up. He died when I was 16. The funeral was on a rainy Tuesday. Everyone said nice things about Dad, but all I could think about was the empty garage and the quiet house. No more motor oil smells. No more beeping calculator sounds at night. After Dad died, Mum had to sell most of the trucks to pay for doctor bills and funeral costs. Henderson Logistics became very small, just 2 old trucks and a few customers who remembered Dad. "We'll keep it going," Mum promised me, "for your father, for you." But my brothers and sister had different ideas. "Mum, this is crazy," Jake said one night when I was 17. He was home from his first year of college, wearing a fancy shirt and talking like he was already a lawyer. "The trucking business is dying. Marcus should go to college like the rest of us. The garage is taking up space we could rent out," Sarah added. She was working at a bank now and always talked about smart investments and cutting losses. Even little Tommy, who was 13 now, joined in. "All my friends think trucks are dumb. Can't we just sell everything and get a pool?" But I didn't want college. I didn't want to rent out the garage. I wanted to make Dad's dream come true. "This is our family business," I told them. Dad wanted me to have it. They all laughed. Not happy laughs, mean ones. "Marcus, you're living in a fantasy," Jake said. "Dad's dead. The business is basically dead too. Time to grow up." That hurt more than anything. They were my family, but they were laughing at Dad's dream. They were laughing at my dream. Mum didn't laugh, but she didn't defend me either. She just looked tired and sad. "Maybe they're right, Marcus," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time to move on." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My own mother, Dad's wife, was giving up on everything he worked for. That night, I made a decision that scared me and excited me at the same time. I was going to save the family business, even if I had to do it all by myself. I spent my 18th birthday filling out papers to start my own company. I called it Keystone Distribution. I didn't tell anyone in my family. They thought I was just being stubborn about college. With the little bit of money I had saved from part-time jobs, I bought one very old truck. It was rusty and made weird noises, but it ran. I painted Keystone Distribution on the side myself, using brushes from the hardware store. My first customer was Mrs. Peterson, who needed her pottery delivered to craft fairs around the state. She paid me $50, and I felt like a millionaire. Slowly, very slowly, I started getting more customers. I worked 18 hours a day. I slept in the truck sometimes. I ate cheap sandwiches and learned to fix everything that broke. My family thought I was wasting my time. "Marcus is playing pretend businessman," I heard Sarah tell her friends on the phone. "It's actually kind of sad." Jake would bring his college friends home and point at my truck. "That's my little brother's adorable hobby business," he would say, and they would all chuckle like it was a joke. Mum started asking me every week when I was going to get serious about my future. She stopped talking about Henderson Logistics altogether, like it had never existed. The worst part was holidays. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every birthday, my family would ask the same questions. "When are you going to college, Marcus? When are you going to get a real job? When are you going to stop playing with trucks?" It broke my heart every single time, but it also made me work harder. 5 years passed, then 10, then 15. My little trucking company grew bigger. I bought more trucks. I hired drivers. I got contracts with big companies who needed things moved all over the country. But I still lived in a small apartment and drove my original old truck. I put every penny back into the business, just like Dad used to do. My family stopped asking about college. They just acted like my business didn't exist. At Christmas dinner, they would talk about Jake's law firm, Sarah's bank job, and Tommy's career as a teacher. When someone asked what I did for work, they would change the subject. It was like I was invisible. 20 years went by like this. 20 Christmases of being ignored. 20 years of being treated like the family disappointment. But my business kept growing. Keystone Distribution became one of the biggest trucking companies in the state. Then in 3 states, then in half the country. I had hundreds of trucks now, thousands of employees, millions of dollars in contracts. And still, my family had no idea. Last month, something interesting happened. Mum called me, and for the first time in years, she sounded excited. "Marcus, I have wonderful news," she said. "Someone wants to buy Henderson Logistics." My heart stopped. Henderson Logistics was down to just one old truck that barely ran, and maybe 3 customers. But it was still Dad's company. It still had his name on it. "Who wants to buy it?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "A big trucking company, and called Keystone Distribution," she said. "They're offering enough money to set us all up for life. Can you believe it? After all these years, your father's little business is finally worth something." I couldn't believe how much this hurt. She was so happy to sell Dad's company to strangers. She had no idea she was selling it to me, her own son. "That's great, Mum," I managed to say. "Oh, Marcus, this changes everything. We're going to be rich. Well, your brothers and sister and I are. The business was never really yours, you know. It was always family property." My hands were shaking. "What do you mean?" "Well, you never went to college. You never got a real job. You just played around with that little truck business of yours. Jake and Sarah and Tommy, they're the ones who made something of themselves. They deserve Dad's legacy, don't you think?" I hung up the phone and cried for the first time since Dad's funeral. 2 weeks later, Mum invited everyone to Christmas dinner. She said she had a big announcement that would change our lives forever. I almost didn't go. After 20 years of being treated like I didn't matter, why should I sit there and watch them celebrate selling Dad's company? But then I thought about Dad. I thought about his dream of family business lasting forever. I thought about all those nights he worked late, all those times he said, "This will all be yours someday, son." Maybe it was time to tell them the truth. Maybe it was time to show them who I really was. So I put on my best suit, the one I wore to important business meetings, and drove to Mum's house in my old truck. The same truck they had all laughed at for 20 years. The Christmas tree was twinkling in the corner. The table was set with Mum's best dishes. My brothers and sister were all dressed up, looking excited and smug. They barely said hello to me. I was used to it. We ate turkey and talked about normal things. Jake's kids, Sarah's new house, Tommy's students. Nobody asked about my work, like always. Then, right when we were finishing dessert, Mum stood up with her wine glass. "I have something very important to tell you all," she said, her eyes shining. "Something that's going to change our lives forever." Jake leaned forward. Sarah put down her fork. Tommy stopped texting on his phone. I just sat there, my heart beating so fast I thought everyone could hear it. "We're selling Henderson Logistics," Mum announced. "We're getting more money than you can imagine." My brothers and sister started whooping and cheering. Jake high-fived Tommy. Sarah actually squealed with joy. But nothing I did mattered. I continued. "I could have owned 100 companies, and you still would have seen me as your loser little brother who plays with trucks." "That's not true," Sarah sobbed. "Isn't it?" I asked. "Mum just told me I'm getting nothing because I never made something of myself. She said Dad's business should go to the children who succeeded. She was talking about a company worth millions of dollars, and she was ready to give it to everyone except me." Mum collapsed into her chair like all the air had gone out of her. "Oh God, Marcus, what have we done?" "You broke my heart," I said, simply. "Over and over for 20 years, you broke my heart." The Christmas tree lights were still twinkling in the corner, but they looked sad now. The whole room felt heavy with all the hurt feelings floating around. Tommy wiped his nose with his sleeve. So what happens now?" That was a good question. What happens when your family finds out you're not who they thought you were? What happens when 20 years of lies and hurt come crashing down? I don't know, I said honestly, Dot. But then I remembered something. I remembered the real reason I came to dinner tonight. I remembered the real bomb I was going to drop, Dot. Because finding out I owned Keystone Distribution wasn't the biggest secret I had been keeping, Dot. There was something else. Something that would change everything even more. Actually, I said, sitting back down slowly, there is something else you need to know. Jake looked like he might throw up. Marcus, please, I don't think we can handle any more surprises. This one's different, I said. This one's about Dad. Mum's head snapped up. What? About your father? I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part. This was the secret I had never told anyone. Not in 25 years. Dad didn't just leave Henderson Logistics to the family, I said carefully. He left something else too. Something I found when I was cleaning out his office after he died. What are you talking about? Sarah asked. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an old yellowed envelope. It was worn from being carried around for so many years, but the writing on the front was still clear. For Marcus, open when you're ready. Dad wrote me a letter, I said. A letter I've been carrying around since I was 16 years old. The room got quiet again, but this was a different kind of quiet. This was the quiet you get when something very important is about to happen. What does it say? Mum whispered. I opened the envelope very carefully. The letter was written in Dad's messy handwriting on paper from his office. Just looking at it made me feel 16 years old again. It says, I had to clear my throat because the words were hard to get out. It says that Dad knew he was dying, and he knew the family business would be too much for just one sick man to handle. I looked up at their faces. They were all leaning forward now, hanging on every word. So he made a plan, I continued. A secret plan that he never told anyone, not even Mum. Mum gasped. What kind of plan? He took out a life insurance policy, I said, a big one. But he didn't list the family as beneficiaries. Then who? Jake asked. I smiled, even though my eyes were full of tears. He listed Henderson Logistics as the beneficiary. He wanted to make sure there would always be money to keep the family. Business alive no matter what happened. Sarah was confused. But Marcus, that money would have gone to Mum when Dad died. She owned the business after he was gone. That's what I thought too, I said. But Dad was smarter than that. He put a condition on the insurance money. I pulled out another paper from the envelope. This one was official looking with lots of legal words and stamps. The insurance money could only be used if someone in the family took over the business and ran it for at least 20 years, I said. If nobody did that, the money would just sit in a bank account, earning interest. Tommy was trying to understand. So the money is still there? Not just still there, I said, growing. For 25 years, it's been growing. I pulled out the last paper from the envelope. This one was from a bank, dated just last week. The account now has $4.7 million in it. I said, Dot, you could have heard a pin drop, $4.7 million. But here's the really crazy part, I said, and I was smiling now because I knew this would shock them the most. According to the legal papers Dad signed, whoever runs the family business for 20 years gets all that money, not the family. Just the person who kept Dad's dream alive. Jake's face went through about 10 different expressions. Wait, you've been running a trucking business for 20 years. 23 years, I corrected. So the money, Sarah started, is legally mine, I finished. All of it. Dad made sure that whoever really cared about the family business would be rewarded. Mum looked like she had been hit by lightning. Marcus, are you saying that on top of owning a huge company, you also have access to millions of dollars from your father's insurance? That's exactly what I'm saying. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more bomb to drop, the biggest one of all. There's just one little problem, I said, folding the papers back up. "The money comes with a condition that Dad wrote in his letter." "What condition?" Tommy asked, looking scared. I stood up one more time and looked around the table at my family. My mother, who had just told me I deserved nothing. My brothers and sister, who had laughed at me for decades. "The condition is that I have to decide if the family deserves to be part of Dad's legacy," I said slowly. "According to his letter, I get to choose whether to share the money and the business with all of you, or keep it all for myself." The silence was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. "So here's my question for you," I said, putting the envelope back in my pocket. "After 20 years of treating me like garbage, after trying to cut me out of Dad's business completely, after making me feel like I was worthless," I paused and looked each of them in the eyes. "Why should I share anything with any of you?" The E2. A clock in the hallway ticked 10 times before anyone spoke. Mum was the first one to break. She put her face in her hands and started sobbing so hard her whole body shook. "Marcus, please, we're so sorry. We didn't know. We didn't understand." But I just stood there, watching them all fall apart. For 20 years, I had been the one crying. I had been the one begging for their love and respect. Now it was their turn to hurt. Jake tried to be the lawyer again, even though his voice was shaking. "Marcus, you're our brother. Family forgives family. That's what Dad would have wanted, is it?" I asked coldly, because Dad's letter has some pretty specific things to say about family. I pulled the letter out again and started reading Dad's exact words. "If my family treats the business or the person running it with disrespect, then they don't deserve what I worked so hard to build." Sarah gasped. "Dad really wrote that?" "He wrote a lot of things," I said, "like how he worried that some of his children might care more about money than about family. How he hoped his kids would support each other instead of tearing each other down." Tommy was crying again. "We messed up, Marcus. We messed up really bad." "You did more than mess up," I said, and my voice was getting hard again. "You spent 20 years making me feel like I wasn't good enough to be part of this family." I started walking around the table slowly, looking at each of them. "Jake," I said, stopping behind his chair, "remember when you brought your college friends home and called my business adorable? Remember how they all laughed?" Jake's shoulders sagged. "Marcus, I was young and stupid." "Sarah," I continued, moving to her chair, "remember when you told your bank friends that I was playing pretend businessman? Remember how you said it was actually kind of sad?" Sarah couldn't even look at me. She just kept crying. "And Tommy," I said, standing behind my youngest brother, "remember when you told your students that your family was successful except for one brother who never grew up?" Tommy's head dropped to the table. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry." "And Mum," I said, finally stopping behind her chair, "remember every Christmas when you asked me when I was going to get a real job? Remember how you stopped talking about Henderson Logistics like it never existed?" Mum looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Marcus, I failed you. I failed your father. I don't know how to fix this." I walked back to my seat and sat down. My hands were shaking now, but not from fear. From anger, from 20 years of stored-up hurt. "You can't fix it," I said quietly. "You can't take back 20 years of making me feel worthless. You can't take back trying to sell Dad's company without even thinking about me." The room felt like it was getting smaller. The Christmas decorations looked fake and sad now. The turkey was completely cold, and the wine stain on the tablecloth had spread even further. "So here's what I've decided," I said, and they all looked at me with desperate, hopeful eyes. "I'm keeping everything." The words hit them like a slap. Sarah actually made a small crying sound. Jake put his head in his hands. Tommy just stared at me in shock. I'm keeping the insurance money. I'm keeping Henderson Logistics. I'm keeping my company, all of it. Mum reached across the table toward me, but I pulled my hands away. Marcus, please, we'll do better. We'll be a real family. Just give us a chance. A chance? I asked. I gave you 20 years of chances. Every Christmas dinner, every birthday, every holiday. I kept coming back, hoping you would see me as something more than a failure. But you never did. I stood up and straightened my jacket. Dad was right about one thing. Families should support each other, but you weren't my family. You were just people who shared my last name and made me feel bad about myself. Jake tried one more time. Marcus, if you do this, you'll be alone. You'll have all that money, but you won't have us. I stopped walking toward the door and turned around. For a second, they all looked hopeful again. You're right, I said. I will be alone. Just like I've been alone for the past 20 years while living in the same town as my family. I pulled out my phone and showed them a picture. It was of a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a little girl with pigtails. Meet my real family, I said. This is Amy, my wife of 3 years, and this is Emma, my stepdaughter. They don't care that I drive an old truck or that I get grease under my fingernails. They love me for who I am, not what I own. Sarah's mouth fell open. You're married? You have a family? I do, I said, smiling for the first time all night. Amy owns a small flower shop. Emma is 6 years old and wants to be a truck driver when she grows up, just like her stepdad. They know all about my company and they're proud of me. They've never once made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Tommy was staring at the picture. Why didn't you bring them tonight? Because I wanted to protect them from you, I said honestly. I didn't want them to see how my blood family treats me. I didn't want Emma to learn that families sometimes hurt each other on purpose. Mum was crying so hard she could barely speak. Marcus, we could get to know them. We could be grandparents to Emma. We could start over. Could you? I asked. Or would you judge Amy for owning a small flower shop instead of working at a bank? Would you make fun of Emma for wanting to drive trucks? Would you treat them the same way you treated me? Nobody answered because they all knew the truth. I walked toward the door, but then I stopped. There was one more thing I needed to say. You want to know the saddest part of all this? I asked, not turning around. What? Mum whispered. Dad's letter has 2 envelopes in it. One for if the family supported the person running the business, one for if they didn't. I could hear them holding their breath. If you had supported me, if you had been proud of me, if you had treated me like family, Dad wanted me to share everything equally. The business, the money, all of it. He wanted Henderson Logistics to become a real family business with everyone, working together. Sarah made a choking sound. What does the other letter say? I turned around one last time. It says that if the family couldn't love and support each other, then the person who kept the dream alive should find a new family. A better family. I pulled the door open and cold Christmas air rushed in. Dad knew that some families grow apart. I said, he knew that sometimes blood isn't enough to make people act like family, so he made sure the business would go to someone who deserved it. Marcus, wait, Jake called out, but I was already walking toward my truck. Don't leave like this, Mum shouted from the doorway. Please. I stopped next to my old truck, the same truck they had all laughed at for 20 years. But now I wasn't embarrassed by it. I was proud of it. This truck had started everything. This truck had carried me away from their cruelty and toward my real life. I'm not leaving, I called back to them. I left 20 years ago. I just forgot to say goodbye. I got in my truck and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see them all standing in the doorway, crying and calling my name Dot. But I wasn't sad anymore. For the first time in 20 years, I felt free. I drove home to my real family. Amy was waiting up for me, and Emma had left me a drawing of a truck with "World's Best Stepdad" written in crayon. "How did it go?" Amy asked, giving me a hug that felt like coming home. "It went exactly like it needed to," I said. Dot. The next morning I called my lawyer and had him set up a trust fund, but not for Jake, Sarah, Tommy or Mum. I set it up for kids, like I used to be. Kids who felt like they didn't fit in with their families. Kids who had big dreams, but no one to believe in them. The trust fund would give them money to start their own businesses, just like I had done with $50 and an old truck. I called it the Robert Henderson Memorial Fund. After Dad. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Jake. "Marcus," he said, and his voice sounded small and tired. "We've been thinking about what you said, about not being real family." "And?" I asked. "And you were right. We weren't family to you. We were just people who hurt you because we didn't understand you." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "We can't take back 20 years, he continued, "but maybe we could try to be better. Not for money, not for Dad's business, just because we love you and we want to earn the right to call you our brother again." "It would take a long time," I said quietly. "Years, maybe decades, and there's no guarantee I'll ever trust you again." "We know," Jake said, "but we want to try. All of us. We want to meet Amy and Emma. We want to learn about your business. We want to understand who you really are." I looked across the room at Emma, who was coloring another picture of trucks. She looked up and smiled at me, and my heart felt full of love. "Okay," I said finally. "We can try, but we start slow, and if any of you ever make Amy or Emma feel bad about themselves, we're done forever." "Deal," Jake said, and I could hear him crying. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for giving us a chance we don't deserve." 6 months later, we had our first family dinner at my house. Amy cooked. Emma showed everyone her truck collection, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. Mum held Emma on her lap and listened to stories about kindergarten. Sarah asked Amy about flower arranging. Tommy played trucks, with Emma on the living room floor. Jake apologized again and asked if he could help with legal stuff for my business. It wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but it was real. And late that night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in Dad's old truck in my garage and read his letter one more time. At the very end, in Dad's messy handwriting, were the words that mattered most. "Son, a family isn't just about blood. It's about people who love you and support your dreams. Build yourself a family that makes you proud. I know you will. I love you forever." "Dad," I folded the letter up and smiled. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered to the quiet garage. I finally figured it out. Outside, snow was starting to fall, getting ready for another Christmas. But this time, I wasn't dreading it. This time, I had a family that loved me back. And that was worth more than all the money in the world. Now let me ask you, if you were in Marcus's shoes, sitting at that table, watching your own family smirk while stripping you of everything, how would you have handled it? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have dropped a bomb just like Marcus did? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your perspective matters. Asterisk. And if you enjoyed this story and want more twists, betrayals, and powerful lessons from family and love, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.